Hi, everyone. My name's Nathan Willingham. I really appreciate the chance to speak today. Unfortunately, I had a conflict, so I had to record this in advance. But I'm sure that there are others here who can answer any questions that you might have. Also, my email is on each slide and at the very end. A little bit about myself. I'm a planner by profession, although I've worked in higher education for the last 2 years. I teach political science as an adjunct at the University of North Alabama, and I'm a grad student at Valdosta State University. I'm also just really passionate about community service and voter education. But I do have to say that I'm not representing UNA or anyone but myself in my comments here today. So today I'm going to discuss the Electoral College, which is the system that we use to select the President of the United States. This system requires a candidate to get 270 out of 538 total electoral votes in an indirect election process that's controlled by the states. The Electoral College was a compromise at the Constitutional Convention, balancing ideas on how government should work. Delegates from the big states wanted government to favor population size. Small ones wanted states to be equal. Some delegates wanted the president picked by the National Congress, others by state legislatures, and some by popular vote. Most of them feared putting too much power directly into the hands of the people. So they compromised on a system that divided up power based on giving a certain number of votes to states based on population and a certain number to those states based on their statehood. That's how the Electoral College was born. The Electoral College is an indirect way of picking the president and vice president. Each state has 2 electors based on their Senate representation and a number of electors equal to their House membership. So as states have been added, the number of Electoral College members has grown, and as population has changed in states, some have gained and others have lost electors. Right now there are 100 senators and 435 members of Congress. Plus, there are 3 electors given to Washington, D.C., so there are a total of 538 electors. Each elector casts a ballot for president and a separate ballot for vice president. To be chosen as president or as vice president, candidates have to get a majority, or 270 votes. The Constitution gives state legislatures control of elections, and they decide how their electors are chosen. Early on, some state legislatures decided for themselves who to send, but over time they've all gone to some form of popular vote. Most states and Washington, D.C. use a winner-take-all system where the winner of the popular vote in a state gets all of that state's electoral votes. Nebraska and Maine use a proportional system where the electors are divided up based on the candidate's share of the popular vote, so they are the only states that split their electors between candidates. States can change the way that they choose electors. In the general election, the names on the ballots represent a slate of electors selected by the parties. There's no requirement that president and vice president run on the same ticket, but the states have chosen to do so since the Civil War. So when casting a vote for a presidential candidate, you're also voting for the vice president, but you're really voting on the electors that will then vote for that candidate in the Electoral College. The Electoral College meets in December after the November general election. Electors meet in their respective states, cast their votes, and send the vote totals from each state to Congress. There's no law that says electors have to be faithful to their commitment to vote for particular candidates, but the Supreme Court recently said that states could replace them or punish them if they were faithless. Congress counts the votes from the Electoral College in a joint session on January 6th, the year after the Electoral College votes. If no one gets a majority of the Electoral College votes for president, then the U.S. House of Representatives chooses the president, but each state delegation gets just one vote. If no one gets a majority of votes for vice president, then the Senate chooses the vice president. Each senator gets one vote. So it's a system that doesn't always seem fair. For example, there have been 4 times in the nation's history where the popular vote winner was not elected president because of the Electoral College. The most recent of these was 2016, when Donald Trump won a majority of the Electoral College votes, but lost the popular vote by almost 3 million ballots. Significant criticism has been leveled at the Electoral College because someone can lose the popular vote but still win the election. It doesn't happen often, but it's still a pretty significant flaw. Other criticism of the Electoral College involves swing states, or the attention that candidates pay to states where the race is closest. The idea is that candidates ignore places where they are safe, or where their opponent has a large lead, and they focus on places where the elections are close because of the winner-take-all system. Why campaign in the place with a safe margin for you, or where the margin is so large it won't be cost-effective to try and compete there? That creates so-called flyover states, meaning candidates fly over those places to get to other competitive swing states. I'm not sure I buy this criticism completely because the candidates' messages can still travel outside of the swing states, but I do think it affects the enthusiasm of voters in so-called safe states. And that's a bad thing because there's always more at stake than just the presidency on the ballot. People that defend the Electoral College say it protects smaller states from dominance by larger ones, particularly saying that the larger urban centers would decide all of the elections without the Electoral College. They'll usually talk about coastal elites deciding the elections and leaving out America's heartland. Other times they'll say it's cities that will choose the president every time over the counties. And while it's true that Democrats lately have won larger, more populous states by larger margins, the fear that popular selection would hurt smaller or rural areas rests on the assumption that candidates couldn't form new coalitions based on new issues. Over time, we have seen major realignments in parties. Just look at how Southern Democrats transformed into the modern Southern Republican Party. So I think there's something to be said for the popular vote being used to select candidates and for the popular vote being able to drive new coalitions, say between factory and agricultural workers. What other options are there? Of course, there's the national popular vote, which we'll come back to in a second, but I also wanted to mention some other options. First, there's proportional distribution based on the state's popular vote. This is how Nebraska and Maine currently operate. In this form, each state would divide up its electors based on the share of the popular vote that each candidate received. A second option would be to base the Electoral College votes on the winners in congressional districts, so that the winner of the district gets one Electoral College vote and the winner of the statewide popular vote or the winner of the most districts gets the other two electors. The problem here is that gerrymandering goes on in the partisan redistricting process by both parties. I think we hear more about it from Republicans today, but it's been a problem historically, and that problem has disproportionately affected minority communities of color. Fundamentally, if we can't trust legislatures to draw fair lines for House districts, then we can't trust the election of a president based on those lines. The analysis that I've seen, based on the website 270 to Win, show that these two alternates would not have changed the outcomes of the 2012 or 2016 elections. Which brings us back to the simpler method, which is selection of the president by popular vote nationwide. Doing that would take either a constitutional amendment or enough state legislatures changing their election rules to recognize the national popular vote as the way their electoral college votes would be cast. There's a movement to adopt what's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is an agreement among states that the state's electors will vote based on the national popular vote, rather than the results of the statewide election. So far, it's been adopted by 15 states and the District of Columbia, but it wouldn't go into effect unless enough states to commit a majority of electoral votes, or 270, are signed on. The idea is that if states representing 270 electors adopt the compact, then the nationwide popular vote will become the means of choosing the president. Even if it isn't permanently written into the Constitution, the popular vote compact would guarantee 270 electoral college votes to the winner of the national popular vote. It's not permanent, since a state could back out of the agreement if the popular vote nationwide was strongly against the statewide vote, but it would change the system, at least temporarily. But any change would require major political support, which genuinely starts with voter education about the current system. So, thank you for taking an interest and participating in this event today to learn more about that system.